This is Doleo, an original thriller fiction podcast presented in serialized format, a chapter at a time. Written by Jared Canton, narrated by Joshua Canton, a SteadyChaos production, 2019. Previously on Doleo. It wasn't the first time I'd awoken that day, but the previous several times I hadn't been able to muster a reason to stay awake. My first coherent thought each time was Cindy, most horrifically, what was left of her. The lifeless collapse of her body, the echoing gunshots throughout the courtroom, the agony on her father's face upon his coming to. It all made me wonder what was truly left of the old me. Could the new me continue to put faith in people, in a system, in a world that constantly fucked the innocent, the better among us, whilst the worst dictated with fear and hatred? I had now, multiple times, chosen to bury that harsh realization with more sleep, in the hope that next time I'd awake, I'd realize it was all just a dream. But repeatedly, I'd awoken from brief half-sleeps to a harsh reality. Tragedy was stalking me. Maybe it stalked all of us. Maybe some of us were just more elusive. I clearly was not, and my life was descending into inexplicable chaos with each passing hour, and merely getting up to face each day was more challenging with each sunrise. I had genuinely, desperately, tried to sleep it away, but it merely afforded brief respite from the agony, from Dad's life of suffering, and James, Brett, and Cindy, but consciousness always brought the same conclusion. You can inhabit a world passively and take what comes, or you can make your own rules and attempt to forge your own reality. Even if in failure, taking control of one's fate at least offered the promise of chance, opportunity for control. I had lived waiting, I had let things happen around me, and it was clearly time for a new approach, because the old approach had failed dramatically. Episode 13, House of Cards. A bullet in the ass would be a real nuisance for a person without my condition. Every stretch, step, sit, squat involves the glutes to varying extents. Fortunately, if I hadn't been staring at my ass in the hospital bathroom's full-length mirror, I wouldn't even know I had a bullet lodged in there several hours ago. The wound was smaller than I expected. It looked more like I had a mole than a bullet removed. An 1.5-inch red vertical seam with 5 or 6 black stitches grooved its way halfway up my left butt cheek. Around the stitching, my skin dimpled slightly, as if the bullet penetration had in fact destroyed a small hunk of flesh upon impact, leaving a tiny void. I panned up the reflection in the mirror, turning to examine the old scar in my abdomen. It was now smaller than my new wound du jour, but no doubt had one day been nearly the same size, on a much smaller body. Further up, about 12 inches, was a yellow-framed black and blue bruise at the base of my sternum. It was most likely from the car accident, or courtroom, or cement wall atop the parking garage. Over the years, pinpointing the origins of my injuries had proven nearly impossible. I pressed at the bruise. It was swollen and I could feel excess fluid evasively slide beneath my finger. It shifted into a different quadrant of the bruise as I pushed it, and then back when I relieved the bruise of pressure. I pulled my boxer shorts up and backed away from the mirror, spinning sideways through the cracked door back into the hospital room. I was greeted with a gasp from a red-faced medical professional. Same dirty blonde hair, same baggy blue-green scrubs. It was then that I realized that I had never gotten her name. She averted her vision, tossing a hand over her brow as if to avoid the sting of sun rays shining directly into her eyes. "I'm sorry, I should have knocked." "It's fine," I said. I turned my back to her. I could feel her stare upon my body. I glanced ahead, to the wall, where her reflection in the picture frame all but confirmed I was right. She looked away, glimpsed at me again, and then away a final time with conviction. "I just wanted to clarify myself. From earlier. I tossed the hospital issue robe over my body. Clarify away, I said, edging to the bed. I took a seat on its corner, not 4 feet from her, red-faced and temporarily thrown off her game. I want to take you to dinner as a professional, as your doctor. Clear. Nothing more. I got it. Are you always this curt? She asked. No, I said, figuring all I could really offer her at this point was a touch of mystery. Then why are you being so now? I get this way when I'm around people whose names I don't know. She reached down and blindly patted just below her left shoulder. Damn, I smirked. I always forget my tags, she replied apologetically. You could use your words. I'm not usually like this either, she said. I'm usually very composed, together, organized, I asked. Yeah, all of those. You could make it up to me. I smiled. This was my litmus test for her, because I had an idea. 2 favors. Maybe, she replied cautiously. First, I dropped the top half of my robe down. It folded at my waist and hung down to my knees. I walked up to her. I was maybe 6 inches taller than she was. Her skin was lighter than mine, maybe a shade or two on one of those makeup color wheels. Can I get your professional opinion on this? I pointed at the nasty bruise centered in my chest. Tell me if this hurts. She caught herself before she even pressed on the bruise. Do you get that a lot? More than you can imagine. People were constantly asking me from which planet I had come, whether I was sitting too near a campfire or wading into the depths of the freezing Atlantic Ocean without hesitation. People without knowledge of my condition sometimes found my behavior odd. Other times, they found it downright alarming. Beyond observation of my strange behavior came other challenges, answering simple questions like, "Are you okay?" It was a puzzle I could rarely answer with any level of certainty. The fingertips on her right hand gently inspected the bruise and surrounding tissues as her left hand wrapped supportively behind my right shoulder. Our faces rested but inches apart, and I tried my best not to breathe directly into her face. My mouth tasted of broken hospital sleep. The endless sleep sessions aimed at avoiding reality had produced an awful, stagnant flavor and I imagine aroma. I peered out the corner of my right eye at her as I gently exhaled to the left, and watched as her eyes never strayed from the bruise, from her simple yet important task. Her soft touch shot vibrations reverberating across my skin. Deep breath. She didn't look up when she said it. I complied. Bone bruise. You'll live. For now, she patted me on the back. She had passed my test with flying colors, much to my chagrin. She didn't show an ounce of the discomfort and embarrassment she had upon finding me nearly naked only moments earlier. I pulled my robe up, feeling rejected in one way and encouraged in another. She turned, placing a hand on the edge of the curtain to slide it open. Dinner, tomorrow. Charlie's at 7. I nodded. You forgot the second favor. She turned back. I did? What's your name? I asked. Kinsley, but for the time being, you can call me Dr. Blaze. She smiled again and pulled back the curtain. It screeched ominously along its steel track, and considering what it revealed, the sound was impeccably appropriate. Standing in the newly revealed vacancy was a man, rigid-faced, probing eyes. We need to talk, Detective Ross said. I learned a long time ago, year 1 of law school in fact, that the only bad thing a suspect can say to the police is anything at all. It is with this in mind that I sat face to face with Detective Ross, wondering why I had made the decision to abandon this one overriding principle, and in turn back myself into a preposterous corner. Ross hummed to himself in the chair across the room, at first for a short count, then he paused and restarted. This time it lasted minutes. At least 2 minutes of inane humming without a word. He stood and dragged a plastic chair with steel legs across the floor to my front. The friction of the steel on tile grinded and screeched, and further contributed to my unsettled state of mind. He plopped in it hard, as if standing exhausted him, before pulling out his notepad, licking his finger, and sifting through the pages as if they held the precious knowledge that could solve this case. He said, opening the conversation. How's the investigation going? I asked, pretending not to know. If the investigation was going well, I would have heard from him earlier, and he would have had a small task force with him. You got big feet, Ryder? His first warning shot. Not particularly. You mind? He stood halfway, gesturing towards my shiny black dress shoes set neatly in the corner of the hospital room. Not at all, I lied. He flipped back the tongue, jotted a note in his book, and dropped his trademark grunt again. 11, he said, then paused as he slithered back into his seat. So you're on the roof of the parking garage, and you see this goon get ready to jump. That's right. Basically. And you see this Latin-slinging man in black. What should we call him? Sam? Sam. Ross shook his head slowly. Murder 2 seems a more appropriate name. I prefer Sam. I don't, he said sternly. It was just a thought. My joke fell on an extended moment of dead silence. Okay, this murderer runs after the guy, reaches for him, then splat. Sure. Then he turns to you, spits out some Latin, and you flee? Right. Did you see what he had on his feet? I saw where he was going. Shoes leave prints. Prints match mine. Vigilante no longer exists. Not really. I know they were black. The more vague I was, the more likely he couldn't prove that such shoes couldn't possibly produce the footprint he had found, if he had in fact found one. I see. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. No, not really. I can't, I lied. Not even a little. Enlighten me. Well, when God created Earth, he also created the seasons, including the shitty cold ones. It just so happens that Boston winters are a bitch. Roads get icy. City drops sand. Sand infiltrates tire tread. Sand ends up in parking garages. The lonely life of sand. Well, eventually, it gets blown around the top floor, finds its way into all the nooks and crannies, particularly up against the walls. So you have Sam's footprint? I have 2 sets of footprints. Not sure I'd say whose I have. His voice jabbed at me like an erect index finger. He might as well have just come out with it. I have the dead guy's prints, and yours. Are the prints unique? Could they help you track him down? I had to offer something. Ross knew I wasn't an idiot. He knew I prosecuted people for a living. In fact, I was surprised I hadn't worked with him on a case before. The prints are very helpful. Not sure they'll get me there, but they'll get me somewhere. Probably to my front door, I thought. And where is that? Well, I suppose they could lead me to any number of suspects that have a size 11 shoe with a flat dress sole. Ross took the moment to look up at me, to lock in, see my reaction. I gave none. Not entirely unlike those over there, he said. Were you wearing those the night of the crime? I shrugged. Honestly, I can't recall. Funny, they look like a potential match. This Sam must have good taste in shoes. I'd bet he does. Ross nodded in agreement. Anything else? I'd really like to get out of this place. Hospitals, they give me the creeps. Yeah, one more thing. Shoot, I said. I slid forward off the bed and started to put my clothes on. Seems when our boy fell and popped off the sidewalk, the weapon he used to stab James wasn't on him. And how is James? I asked. He's still in a coma, 50-50 or something. James is a good man. I really hope he makes it. Yeah, Ross said dismissively. But back to the weapon. You didn't see him ditch it? I was a ways behind him. He probably tossed it in the garage somewhere. We had dogs in there. Nothing. I really wish I could help more, but he cut me off. Of course you do. And don't worry. I'll find this vigilante fellow you call Sam. Then you can rest easy. I have full faith. He took a hard step towards me, then extended his hand. We shook. The excess pressure in his grip felt intentional. Here's my card. Call me day or night if you make up, conjure up anything that can help us. I held his hand firmly, matched his stare, and responded. I understand how hard your job is. If I think I can help in any way, I'll be sure to call. I placed my palm on his back and let him past the curtain. He exited, and I crashed into the chair and exhaled a sour breath. There could be no doubt now. He knew I was lying, and I could think of only one way out of this mess. The best way to counter a lie about a vigilante that doesn't exist is with truth, and the only way to counter this lie I had created was to make it true. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed Doleo, please come back for future episodes arriving at regular intervals, and subscribe and rate us on your favorite podcast application. If you enjoyed this production, please visit the SteadyChaos Productions YouTube page and subscribe for more content from our production team.